Hello, hello, hello. And let's see who's with me today. I know that this is an odd um, go live, but let's see who's with me today. Okay, as we set up. Who will be here to join me? Today's convo. This is an odd time, but let's see. I haven't gone live in a long time. But as I said, if you're with me as we have this weird conversation, give us a shout. What's your name? Where are you joining us from? Or where are you joining me from? I keep saying us because I'm used to being on radio. But let's see, who are you and where are you joining us from? Where are you joining me from? For anybody who's here with me, I know it's, as I said, it's been a while since I've gone live. I don't know how the algorithm is going to take it. Maybe first Facebook doesn't welcome me anymore because I've been off for so long after doing so many live binges. But as I said, give me a shout. Give me a shout of who I'm with here today. This is not going to be long, but it is a bit of a, it's not a rant, but it is a conversation regarding this. And I do want to go back to taking a few questions, especially on the economy. I know it seems to be something that always confuses and bemuses our people sometimes. Kondwani, thank you so much for joining us here. I always keep saying us, but we are a family. We are a family. But yes, it is something to discuss, and I'm going to share this even with my F3 army. For those of you who are with me, okay, we just had a little bit of a okay. So yes, we'll be getting started right away. Thank you so much for joining me. Um, Yeah, so there has been questions, and I keep getting these because people always ask, "What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts?" Because I have been an economic analyst as long as I've been a financial advisor, because I always speak on the general economy as well as I speak on some certain affairs. And so today, I'm gonna try and backtrack to a lot of the things I've said before, and not to step back. I haven't changed my position on a lot of things. I have always believed in domestic wealth creation. It's what I stand for. Okay, to see the Zambian people hold as much wealth as truly possible, whether through investment, whether through enterprise, somewhere along the lines, we have to get out of this thing of finding it comfortable that we as people or we as a nation almost have poverty as a middle name. It's not a nice thing. And I don't know why. It's something that we've even started being comfortable marketing about ourselves. And that's something we should start working on. So today I'm gonna ask the question. I think the biggest news this whole week was the whole Vedanta returning. Now I have no views on Vedanta personally. Obviously, they do have a lot of leverage problems, and I think we should all actually read very carefully into whether or not they'll be able to fulfill those promises. That's a different story. Vedanta does have quite a lot of debt. In fact, when we looked at some of its debt, I can actually read some of it out to you so that we all clear on where we stand with this. Vedanta actually has a situation where they're even trying to borrow another $1.3 billion from Standard Chartered. Currently, one of the other issues that you're seeing is the discussions regarding lending rates are currently in progress, and the loan could be priced around 14 to 15% for the 3 years. So they're relatively priced high. And I'm going to read a quick statement here. It said early in August this year, S&P had lowered its Vedanta Limited outlook from stable to negative due to risk in refinancing amid a tough funding environment and limited cash. S&P also mentioned the downgrade of Vedanta Resources Limited rating could happen if they do not make progress in fundraising by the end of 2023, if they engage in distressed debt exchanges. So currently, Vedanta is actually dealing with a lot of debt stress right now. We're looking at numbers where they're dealing with 14-50%. They've got about 3 billion worth of bonds they've had to issue just to try and make ends meet. So they are under stress as a company, and they're looking to try and refinance, and they're refinancing at a time when interest rates are high. So that's the clear picture. Okay, that's the clear picture, even about them. They're no angels. They're going through some hell on earth right now. But what I want to focus on is a lot of us keep asking the question, what's going on with, is it a leadership problem? Is it a structural problem? What is it that prevents us from being able to take back natural resource assets? What makes it difficult? Why is it that we cannot run these natural resource assets? Or is it that we don't have the capacity, we don't have the capabilities? What is it that prevents us from owning? Because everybody says, can Zambians not run mines? This is the question that keeps getting thrown back. Can Zambians not run mines? And it's actually a credible question. And it's actually time, I think, we addressed this demon effectively. Because every time, and it's not Zambians, it's Africans, every time an African government grabs an asset that's owned by a foreigner because foreigners are doing too well in their country, years later, they have to return those assets back because they've been poorly run. So the question I want to ask today is, why do foreign-owned asset grabs fail or backfire so often in Africa? Please, let's put our comments, let's have a discussion here. But I'm going to give you my take on this, okay? And I'm going to say up front, what I'm going to say will probably offend some people. That's just the truth. It'll probably offend some people because quite a number of people like being offended, okay? And there's nothing I can do about it. You can't, if you Jordan Peterson once said, if you're going to think, you're going to risk offending people. That's a reality. So I'm going to start with one of the most famous asset grabs in African history, or recent African history, or modern African history, and that's Zimbabwe. So for those of you who understand the story, I explained this earlier, and I'm gonna read from what I had written so that I can be consistent here regarding it. But I can tell you that I was a 13-year-old boy when the Zimbabwean economic meltdown happened. Back then, Zimbabwe used to be one of the jewels of African agricultural production. Okay, they had a brilliant agri-production sector, but they also had an unequal society. They had a very rich farming class in Zimbabwe who were the former colonial British, and they had agreements which they had made with the British government that after a period of time, after these people have profited, they're going to hand over the land to the Zimbabwean, to the locals. Unfortunately, that agreement had its own, I think it was called the Lancaster Agreement. That agreement had its own mess that ended up not working out. And a bunch of very young people who thought in 2001 they were going to become rich farmers, seeing all these white people who own these farms, then we're going to finally get their land and we're going to be rich. And that was the promise to the average Zimbabwean. What ended up happening is brutally when this thing kept on delaying, in about 2001, when the Lancaster Agreement had expired, it appears that a group of people who were calling themselves war veterans, whereby some of them were not even war veterans, ended up just shoveling out a bunch of Zimbabweans off the land. I mean, a bunch of white Zimbabwean farmers off the land, who, mind you, some of them even came to Zambia and actually boosted our agricultural sector. We even benefited from this. So the question is, why 18 years later did this fail? I'm going to show you a video, which I've shared before, on how you see a former white farmer who was thrown off his land violently, now coming back to a hero's welcome by his former workers. Because there was so much joblessness and pain in that area where that farmer was. His name is Mr. Smart. So take a look at this video. It's a starting point. We're going to go into, this is a business lesson, effectively, because this is going to be a little bit of a business lesson as to what things you should be building around businesses. These are conversations we should be having. But why, firstly, let's take a look at this story. After 18 years of chucking white farmers off and saying it's our land, now they started welcoming them back like heroes. back from war and celebrating them. And this touched me because I saw this video one day. I was working and I was watching the news, and I saw this video, and I'm like, but what happened? I thought this was a whole revolutionary movement. Now what happened? How are we welcoming them back like they're the heroes of the century? And then I started to understand deeply what I was getting wrong when I was looking at this scenario. So check this video out. Look at them all welcoming him like he's Jesus. Look at that. Look at them. They've in the decades of independence. Look at this.
Their support has been amazing, and all the way along, they're always phoning us. When are you coming back? How are things going? So they haven't lost faith at all. We had to really keep the faith up and said, no, we're definitely coming back, and we stuck to it. Even before the change of government, we told them that, and the change of government, of course, was a godsend to us.
Now we are all happy because the community was gaining from Mr. Smart. So I would like to say congratulations to what actually has happened. I was very disappointed of how Mr. Smart was chugged off from this place.
Jobs. Yes. Yeah.
100%.
100%.
This also.
People were missing that.
Yes.
And we are so happy about it.
Yes.
And I think you're going to fulfill what the people were missing.
As always.
Thank you.
As always. No, thank you very much.
So I'll ask your questions. What are your views on that video? That's years of saying the white man is our devil and he has destroyed us and everything. You chuck the white man off, and then jobs vanished with the white man. Everything vanished. And mind you, this is the same story that has happened in the copper belt. You chuck the investors out of their mining operations, and jobs just start vanishing in the copper belt. Okay? All of a sudden, no activity. You have to start laying people off. You have to start paying people's gratuity and retirement packages. And there they are just waiting for the next thing to happen. So you can say it's just there, but this is pretty much the story of this last 10 years, where you try to start re-grabbing mines again. So the reality I want people to understand is, one of the things I understood is that a lot of people do not understand business ecosystems. You can get rid of these foreign owners of assets, but what ends up happening is these people did not have the business capacity. There's a difference between having labor capacity and entrepreneurial capacity. Please, people, separate these two things. Separate the two things. Because this is the problem. We often confuse being able to work on a farm with being able to own a commercial farm. See, very quickly, the Zimbabwean situation saw 90% reduction in productivity, which meant people went unemployed. South Africa was dealing with a situation where 4,000 Zimbabweans were running through their border every single day, people. Every day, 4,000 Zimbabweans were coming into the South African border every day because the economic situation in Zimbabwe was dead at that time. Yes, things have started to improve, but it was dying at that time. These are realities, okay? If that was not the case, then explain why there's such a big Zimbabwean population outside of Zimbabwe. If you're going to tell me that things were perfect, we were there, Okay, I remember I remember when I was first going to school in Zimbabwe, the Zim dollar to the Botswana pula, that was the exchange rate we were using. The Zim dollar to the Botswana pula was 7 Zim dollars to 1 pula. I come out, okay, it's 13 to 1, it's doubled. Go back, it's 20 something to 1. Come back out, it's 30. Then for when I got to the third term, not even third year, third term of my first year of high school in Zimbabwe, we went from 7 to 1, 7 Zim dollars to 1 pula, to 56 Zim dollars to 1 pula. This is how the whole Zim dollar situation devalued. And it started getting worse and worse and worse because they had no exports. Yes, there was sanction. So there were ultimately a lot of things that happened to Zimbabwe. One is that the farm workers recognized that farming requires a good relationship with a bank. Okay? In order to farm, you need a bank to finance the operations of the farm as you wait for the crop. And this is what they discovered. What did they look and they discovered? They could not go to any single bank to operate the farm, pay the workers, keep everything alive. They couldn't. When they're planting crops that they have to wait months for, they had no banker they could go to because it was that white farmer who had a relationship with that banker. Now you have no relationship with that banker. So already 2 gone. Okay? Number 2, suppliers. Suppliers, these farmers had cultivated relationships with the suppliers they have. And those suppliers were able to give them credit terms, good prices, because they understood the reliable customer they had. They had a relationship that they built for a long period of time. So when they took over those farms, relationships with the suppliers got severed instantly. Okay? So now they had to start again with the relationship with the suppliers. And suppliers who just look at you and say, there's no credit here. The prices are now back to full price and there's nothing. Now you can't farm profitably. Then even if you could get your hands on money to farm and you could get your hands on suppliers, now the buyers who used to offer a premium price to that white farmer when he owned it, gone. That relationship is gone. What we don't understand as Africans is it is not just about the operation of the asset. It's about the ecosystem that adds value to this asset, what we call the value chain. What is it that goes in, goes out, and supports this asset? This is why you need to understand things like business model canvases. Read that stuff. The Strategizer business model canvas helps you see a business for the full system it is. Michael Kotter's, a value chain. That's a very important thing. Yes, there are 3 internal things you have to do in value, in creating value. You must solve problems, you must sell products, you must serve people, but you also have to distribute products to customers, and you also have to get inputs at a very low cost. If you can't manage low cost inputs and lower cost distribution, you will go down in flames. Okay? And those are the realities, again, that a lot of the urban class who like telling us, take over these things, grab these things, grab these things. We like saying that, but we don't understand the ecosystem of value, the thing that creates the value of these assets. So that's the problem that comes up with this. Then there's relationships with regulators. The Zimbabwean farmers did not have relationships with the export markets. So the British just said, no more crops for Zimbabwe, get them out of here. So you've got these things piling up that you could not export, you can't sell, you've got no money from the bank to finance them, you can't pay your suppliers, nothing. Farm production, down. Okay? And this happens when you grab any asset, be it a bank, be it a bank, be it a mine, be it a farm, be it an airline, whatever. If you grab assets without an understanding of the ecosystem that asset operates in, it will crumble because you view the asset as profitable. So I've shared this video earlier today on Money FM of Vusita Makwa, who talked about when he took over a business. Okay, a business he worked in. So this is the mentality we have. But these guys, they make so much profits in these mines, all these things. Let's just take it and it'll be ours. Sunny Zulu even wrote about this thing. He wrote about it in Eccentric Thoughts. The mentality we have of just grabbing things and why sometimes that works horribly. So here's a story of Vusita Makwa who talks about how not understanding the ecosystem of relationships. Okay, there's often visions, and relationships that are built that allow a business to operate in a very valuable way that we do not see that these foreign investors have pure sight of. And this is why you have to be very careful about grabbing assets. This is why sometimes even when people buy companies, they keep the original owners in there to maintain the relationships that kept this company going. But without those relationships, there is often a struggle. So watch this video on Vusi, who talks about trying to take over Metro Cash and Carry's division and how his business went from 460 million rand a year in revenue, boom, down to 16 million rand. Why? Because he did not understand the relationships that made that 463. He just thought everything just came part and parcel.
Yeah. I used to own, anyone here know that I used to own a food services business? Yeah. I got clapped. That one. I got a proper, guys, and maybe this is something so the first thing about me is I don't tell people everything I do. And I'm learning this the hard way. Now what I'm actually going to start doing is I want to start sharing as often where I fail as when I do succeed. Because I think it's a lie to just tell people when it's going well. And people go, oh no, this guy's coining it. So I had a food service because I used to work in Africa's largest food distributor company called Metro Cash and Carry. And I was a director there. And when I left, a part of my leaving the company, I said to them, I want to take the whole unit I was running. When I was running it, it was 460 million. And I entered into negotiations, met the board, presented to the board, Netbank Capital, Investec, and a couple of other banks were major shareholders. And I went and presented to all of them. So I presented to Goss Solomon and Stephen Kossoff at Netbank, at Investec. I went and met with, at the time, Mike was the CFO, Tom Borden was still CEO. I presented to all of them. My business model was actually very simple. Very simple. My big competitor, I've never told anybody this, but my biggest competitor was a company you may or may not have heard of called Bosasa. True story. So my value proposition was actually very simple. Metro Cash and Carry owned Trade Center. Remember Trade Center? So they owned Trade Center, they owned the Metro store, they owned the 7-Eleven, the IGA brand. And then if you ever go to townships, there were those brands called Lucky 5 or Lucky something something. Remember those doors? Yeah, they used to have a private label called Family Favorite with the 2 F's written like this. Metro owned that business. Most people don't even know who Metro is. 1996, Metro Cash and Carry was the only company in the Johannesburg top 10 that wasn't a mining house. In 1996, Metro Cash and Carry was larger than Pick n Pay and ShopRite combined. So if you don't know who they are, hamba buzu mamako. They definitely know who Metro Cash and Carry was, right? When I left, there were about 17 billion. So they'd lost a lot of money. Anyway, so I'm leaving because the CEO decides he wants to take a new direction. And I was running this unit and I said to him, but I've been running this thing for like 4 years. You can't just close it. So I convinced him and then, as I said, presented to the board, presented to the funders. So here was my pitch. My pitch was the whole business unit with the customers, give it to me. I'll run it, Vusi Tembegwayo, as a standalone business. Day one, I become the largest distributor of cash and carry, of the largest distributor of retail goods to the government market. Day one, who's black owned. Day one. Okay? That's the pitch. Everybody loves the pitch. Everybody agrees. So I leave. What do you think happened day one? See, when I was working there, we got an order from Baragwanath to supply R1 million worth of bread. I took the order from Baragwanath. I sent it to the Trade Center store in Southgate. They supplied it. But it sat on my P&L as my revenue. You guys get it? Now, I get the order from Baragwanath for a bar. I go to them and I say, well you got to pay us. No, where's the money? We hear you, but no, the order's nice. Where's the money? Guys, a company where I worked, my guy. Like, I was there. And just to be clear, they didn't parachute me up. Like, I started with everybody else and I worked my way up. And I became one of 2 black people in the board. One of the reasons I left is because I kept fighting this thing of being the only black. Like, I don't want to be the first black, the only black. Let's just get more people. You know what I mean? So immediately I got cut off. I went from 460 million when I took over the business. In my first year, I did 16 million. That was the amount of money, that business that disappeared. Because you know what happens when SASSA gives you a contract to supply food parcels in Kuruman, yeah, to 1,000 pensioners at 1,000 rand a hamper, that's $1 million, and you don't show up on time, SASSA is not giving you that order again. So I had to go back and go, well, take it back. I took a club. The amount of money I bought that business over for from them, and the amount of money I gave it, I took a proper beating. Like a proper beating. So a lot of the stuff I share is kind of like, I've been.
So the lesson I was trying to push there is that you can grab a business, okay? You can inherit someone's business or grab someone's business. But what you don't understand is that business has got a lot of relationships that are connected to it, okay? And it's tied to those owners of that business. Okay, there's a lot of relationships that those owners have. And it's those owners who secure those relationships, who keep those relationships. Even when a company gets acquired, there's still a reestablishment of relationships that need to be built. So the question is, do you have the same relationships? No, you don't. You can inherit a business, but you cannot inherit the relationships. You can grab a business, but you cannot grab the relationships. So he says, okay, he takes over this business. He was working in there, but they said, my friend, we don't know you. We know the owners. Those are the people who we could give credit to. We could give a 1 million rand order to people on credit who we knew, but we don't know you. Okay, so therefore, we're not going to give you credit. And this is what ends up happening, even when you start grabbing mining assets, start grabbing farm assets, bank assets, telco, Zamtel, whatever you want, is that the relationships that are cultivated that support these businesses, because a business does not operate in isolation. It has suppliers, it has bankers, it has regulatory relationships that it has technology suppliers, it's got input suppliers, it's got customers, distributors. So many people are around this business, so many stakeholders and entities. That's why I said you have to look at this thing in terms of the key activities, key relationships, distribution of value. There's also a brand that's connected to the previous owners. There's so many relationships. You underestimate relational capital. And when you grab an asset, you lose all the relational capital. And this is why when Africans grab former colonial assets or foreign-owned assets, we always sink those things to the ground. Why? Because we view the value of those businesses without understanding what happens when that person leaves. What happens to all the relationships that feed it? Okay? You take over a mine, and I'm using this as an example because it's a real issue you need to think about. Because you keep chanting for this, but we don't understand. I have talked about the fact that Zambians need to build mines. This thing of grabbing is a lazy, envious person's issue. Grabbing an asset is not based on the fact that someone did you wrong. It's because you are envious and you are entitled and you are jealous. You want to grab the mine, but you know that they did not take a mine from you. They took barren land that you were not using. The problem with us Africans is we're not using that land. So here's what I suggest. If you're going to grab assets from these people, then give them all their equipment, strip everything off it, and then take back the land as it is. Would you want to? No, you don't. You want the things they've put on it. And then you start saying, no, that mine belongs to us. No, it doesn't. You didn't build it. Okay, a mine is not the land that it's on. Let me give you a simple example. Do you know that Argentina has got more copper reserves than Chile? Yet Chile is the world's biggest producer of copper. Why? Because reserves mean nothing. Potential means nothing. It means nothing. It's what you do with it. So this is the problem I have with us. We want to wait for someone to build on us and then say, no, you people are evil. You took from us. And this is why we're always cursed whenever we try and take these things back. Because we're trying to take the things they built and not things that we owned. So take it back from the position of when you owned it. Take that back. Because that's dangerous. And I know the argument would be, but what about all the minerals they've taken, everything? You were not even mining those minerals. Stop lying as if you were doing it yourself. You were not. So that's an envy and laziness thing. And we've encouraged, we've cultivated it. All these pump your fists up social activists and all these people, they distract people from building. So I say it again. I want us to have wealth. But in order to do that, people, we must learn to start building, not taking. Taking assets from people does not do anything because we will always sink them. We lack the relationships. Okay. You don't have in Zambia, and even look, ZCCM even faced this. They did not have the relationships with banks that people like Glencore have. Glencore have got brilliant relationships with banks. They can go and borrow, buy another a mining asset for $14 billion if they want. They didn't have a real problem pumping money into Mopani. They can. They can access capital to do that pretty easily. The issue is whether you can do it. You can't do it. That's where the problem comes. And you can't access the capital that is needed to run that operation at the cost they can. They can access more capital because they've got better relationships with banks, and they can access it cheaper than we can. That's where the problem lies. Okay? So right now you've got Coldeco, which is the Chilean mine. They have just raised $2 billion in a bond in New York on a 6% interest rate. Do you think we can do that here in Zambia? The answer is no. We cannot raise $2 billion on a 6% interest rate. That's not going to happen, okay? Because we don't have the relationships with these people. So already we're handicapped right there. Then you try and go to the people who supply equipment. They're going to give you the fair price. They're not going to give you the discount price that they do to their bigger customers. They're Glencore, all these people. They're not, because you haven't cultivated a relationship with them. You have not cultivated a relationship with your banker. You have not cultivated a relationship with your supplier. Then when you want to take the copper out the ground and move it to where the warehouses are, where it gets traded, you have not cultivated a relationship with the transporters and logistics firms. You have not cultivated a relationship with the London Metals Exchange. You have not cultivated a relationship with a broker. You have not cultivated a relationship with a buyer. Okay, the brokers, the buyers, the storage, the transport, the suppliers, the capital providers. You have zero relationships with these people. So when you walk into their office, the first question they're going to ask is, "Who are you? And why should I give you any concessions that I used to give that last person?" And right there is where you start sinking. Okay, because your cost of doing business goes up. The revenue you're generating goes down, and all of a sudden, what was a profitable asset sinks because you lack any relationships that value. So what you must learn, and this is a strong business lesson actually, the value of your business is actually built in the relationships you cultivate. Okay? The value of a business or any asset is built into the relationships that it is cultivated. So if you have not built relationships, especially as the owner, then you can forget about the value of that business. It has no value. So even the people who own and operate these businesses, have they built relationships into it? So a lot of these assets we think are glorious and wonderful. When we grab them, we fail because we undervalue human relationships. All we see is they make money, so let's get it. So this is where the problem comes. And whether it's a telecommunications company, like I said before, whether it's a bank, whatever it is, the moment we grab it, it sinks because we don't have the relationships to keep this thing going well. So Vusi actually gave a second talk where he talked about how the Afrikaners circumvented this issue. Remember that South Africa was first in the hands of the British, then in the hands of the Afrikaners after the Afrikaners kicked out the British. And how did the Afrikaners generate and build wealth? Well, because the Afrikaners were very smart enough to say, you don't take over someone else's house, you build your own. So they started building their own assets in South Africa and building their own internal ecosystems to keep those things alive. So here's a video that shows how the Afrikaans government, now you can be as offended as you want, wonderful, great, go and sing to the tunes, but the best thing you can do is learn, okay? Switch off your offense cap for a second and learn the lesson that those who build their wealth are the people who control it very well. Those who try and take it often suffer the curse of the backfiring grabs. So take a look at this video and listen carefully to what he has said.
Criticizing them. And that, by the way, I love understanding people rather than criticizing them. And that, by the way, is exactly why I admire Afrikaners. Tell you something. 1948, the Nats take power from the British. And the Afrikaners go, you know, the British had a system of economic empowerment called EEE, English Economic Empowerment. They built companies like Old Mutual and companies like Standard Bank. So Standard Bank is 150 years old. It's easy to spot their companies are usually listed and they have English names, Old Mutual, Mutual and Federal. Yeah? And the Afrikaners go, do we want to buy shares there? Well, if we buy shares, then the money circulates and doesn't go into the real economy. The Afrikaners go, no, we're not going to buy shares. What we're going to do is we're going to create our own businesses. And so they go, we need a bank. And a couple of banks are started, Volkskas, yada, yada, yada. They were amalgamated into the Amalgamated Banks of South Africa, ABSA. They go, we need insurance houses, okay? Sanlam. Yeah? Because remember, the British had MMI, Momentum Metropolitan. Any of you who are feeling offended? Here's a beautiful thing about history is it doesn't care about your feelings. It's just history. I'm just telling you what happened. I'm not making it up. This is what happened, right? And they go, we need our own chain of retailers. Who's that kid you were telling me about studying at Stellenbosch? What's it? Whitey, what are you guys doing there with that thing called ShopRite? We're going to give you guys some money. Go grow this thing. They built, guys. These guys, they went into the real world and built. Real stuff, shops, products, stuff. You give me one company, I'll pay you. Just one company that we built in the past 25 years. That I can walk into today and go, yeah, here, I'm buying. This is me.
And that's an example of what he's talking about as well. So even in our history, by the way, people will say, oh, back in KK, people, most of those things, we grabbed them. Most of the state assets we're talking about, we grabbed them, even from the Zamtels, all these things, they got grabbed. These are not things we built. These are things we grabbed and we barely improved. Okay, that's where the problem comes. We like grabbing wealth. And that's why I've asked the question, do we build or do we grab wealth? And this is what you need to understand is that inheritors of wealth often lack the vision and relationships required to build wealth. Somebody will inherit, let's say, their father's wealth estate or their mother's wealth estate, but they don't have the advisors, the tax consultants, the legal consultants, all the consultants and advisors who actually groomed and helped their parents build that wealth. They've disconnected themselves from all those people and they go and just say, no, this is my wealth now, I'm just keeping it. And then what happens? Vanishes. So here's a thing you need to understand. 80% of all millionaire wealth around the world, not even just the US anymore, around the world is first generation. And then about 70% of millionaire wealth is destroyed by the inheriting generation. Why? Because the inheriting generation often fails to inherit the relationships and the vision and the knowledge that is required to operate that wealth and to keep growing it. So there's a mentality and a community that people had built to build wealth. But there's the consumers of wealth, unfortunately, do. And this is why we always have this situation. Why is it when we grab assets, they always end up getting run down? Why do they always end up failing? Why does this happen so many times? I'm sure you can point out one or two success stories, but the large majority of African stories of grabbing assets by former people is that they have built ecosystems around those assets that have made them as successful as they are today. They are entrenched. These are hardcore systems of relationships that protect them. Because when people build something, they then build a system around it. Listen to this very carefully. When people build products, they build a system of departments called a business. When people build a business, they build an ecosystem called a value chain. Each system protects what's in it. Okay, the business protects the product, the value chain protects the business. So if anybody intrudes and gets this business, this value chain will just simply slip away and destroy this business and leave it to the point where you've got this huge business with all these employees, all these mine workers, all these liabilities, no customers, no bankers, no suppliers, nothing. You're left in a dead situation. So inheriting something is a very dangerous activity. Okay, you must be very careful of grabbing an asset, even if you buy another person's business. What are the legacy issues in there? What relationships kept this business alive? And what relationships are you going to bring? You see, whenever someone buys a business, I'll give you an example. When BP or Puma Energy recently bought Ogas for $3 million, sorry. That's a recent transaction that happened on the stock market. Puma Energy knows that it's coming there with a network of gas stations which can distribute that product. It knows it has an LNG business in the back that can feed into OGAS. They know they can feed this thing with supply cheaply. They're already coming in with their own relationships. So if you're going to take over someone's assets, do you have your own banking relation? Do you have the blessing of your own banker who's going to help you supply capital for it? Do you have input providers who you already have relationships with? Do you have customers or a distribution network that you can cheaply distribute this with? Then you're buying a good asset. Because if it fits into your own ecosystem, do you have an already existing ecosystem where you can fit this asset in? That's how you can make this a profitable business. Facebook, when they bought Instagram, already had an advertising ecosystem that they could feed into Instagram. They already had databases. They already had systems. So when people buy assets or they acquire assets, they're looking at themselves and saying, does this fit with our current ecosystem? If it doesn't, then we're going to leave this. If it does, that's when we're going to acquire it. So if you study enough or engage in enough mergers and acquisitions, you will learn that one of the key things they always look for is compatibility with the ecosystem. Whenever you're trying to merge, whether it's Atlas Mara and what's it, it's Atlas Mara and Axis who are coming together. That's an ecosystem merger that we're looking at. These were two consumer-based banks or retail-based banks who are coming together to form this Megatron of what's it, or this Megazord of retail banks. They knew the ecosystem they were working with. They knew the relationships they have. Axis is probably looking very carefully at the things that they're trying to do. So you have to be very careful to ask the question. So even if you're looking at mergers and acquisitions even happening on the stock exchange, ask yourself, does one feed the ecosystem? This is why when I looked at the Puma Energy OGAS acquisition, I gave that a thumbs up because I could see how OGAS could fit into the Puma Energy ecosystem. And they already had the capacity to supply it and the capacity to sell it. They already had this ecosystem and they were using it as a diversification because OGAS already has a market of customers and they were just layering it onto their Puma Energy network. So you can see how that becomes an amplifier to the value of that business. So all of this boils down to the fact of why don't we like building wealth? Because we're lazy. That's the issue. And Africans, we don't like to hear that because we always think it's an insult. But the reality is those who advocate for the grabbing of assets, instead of taking the massive bare land, people, you can tell me about grabbing white farmers. There's plenty of empty land in Africa, empty unfarmed land. Why are you not doing it? Jay-Z, in his song Lost Ones, it's one of my favorite songs. It was one of the most underrated album, Kingdom Come. I loved it. Jay-Z in the Kingdom Come album said in Lost Ones, he said, I hear people out there saying they made Hove. Okay, then make another Hove. That's a threat he threw out there. He said, if you made me, if you are the reason I exist, then make another me. If it's all about you, make another me. Okay? And that's what a lot of these foreign investors are saying. Okay, people, if it's your land that made us rich, then you've got plenty more. You have plenty of mineral reserves. Why does Africa have so many mineral reserves and very little mineral production? Because land alone does not equal, mineral production. Why do we have so much untilled arable land? Africa has got 60% of its land still untilled, arable land, still untilled. It's got the best land for farming. But then why do we have low farm production? When you look at potato production in the world, it's Russia, Ukraine. These are the top countries. Yeah, zero. Zambia has got multiple lakes and multiple rivers. Yet 70% of fish export is done by who? Egypt, a desert with one river. We're being defeated by a desert with one river. Malawi and Zambia, we're even importing fish. My goodness. Okay? Why? Because we don't understand that just natural resources does not translate to wealth. It takes ingenuity. It takes relationship cultivation. And those things come from building. Okay? So whatever you got from today, and I know it's been long and we've really thrashed it out, give me a thumbs up if you really like this. Tag one of your friends below if you really think that you got some value out of this, and tell me what you got from this. Maybe you disagree. I understand. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I understand. But all I can tell you is I've given you the different cases. I've given you the different evidence to say that grabbing and even taking, even acquiring things without adequate understanding of the relationships that support its value is always very dangerous. So I don't know if you all have any questions. If you do, please by all means throw them in here. I'd love to obviously answer some of them some other time. I'll try and get back to doing lives once in a while. I know I haven't done one in a while, and I know that we can at least have a conversation about a hot button issue. I am hoping that at least on Fridays. By the way, feel free to give me a comment or anything and tell me what you think has been the hottest economic, not political, people, economic issue. Okay, markets and economic issue that we can come down, battle down, and have a conversation about it. I'm always free to try and do this because helping people understand how economies, business, and industries operate, that's my thing. That's at least the duty I can serve to this country. And thank you to everyone who's been with me. Michelo, thank you so much. Yes, I'm glad you got something from it. Nice lesson there. Thank you so much. Alfred, yes, thank you so much for joining us today. Aaron, thank you for recommending one of your friends. And Alfred, I'm thankful that you learned something there. I know that you were talking about what was the lesson we got from there. And I love the Steve Urkel picture. Thank you so much for that. And yes, relationships. Relationships are the key. The value of your business is based on how well you've cultivated relationships with your suppliers, your bankers, your customers, the loyalty of your customers. I've even seen people take over businesses and customers just say, right, that new supplier is not one I even want to do business with. I'm out. And right there, things just change. Okay, so you have to be careful about that. To everyone who was with me, Kondwani, thank you so much for joining us. Paul, I know you were from Lusaka. Thank you for joining us as well. Badisa, thank you for joining us. I keep saying us because I'm so used to being on radio as a team. Well, Zatu is a team here, but thank you for joining us here today, people. See you later. Have a blessed weekend, and hopefully this has helped you clarify what we should be thinking about when we're pushing for economic policy. So when your politicians are making you a promise, think about it logically and then make your decisions based on it logically. Okay, that's the way this country will operate best. Mind you, sorry, just one other thing. That's the difference with China. China has built a lot of these things. They don't grab things. They build. They start on bare land and they build. Even the Saudis have built. These people build things. I think you don't understand. They build, okay? And they build relationships. When you build things, you tend to build relationships. So what should we do with our mining sector? Maybe it's a question that people will throw to me. Is we need to train people to build these things, okay? That's the reality. It's a hard game, by the way. I'm not in mining because that thing is difficult, people. These things are difficult, okay? But you need to train people to build and reinvest, and not just to build an activity, to build an ecosystem of relationships, cultivating relationships with bankers, customers, suppliers, regulators, international partners, everyone. Building an ecosystem of relationships seems to be something that, because of our divisive nature as Africans, we're very divided, okay? That is a colonial legacy, yes. But we're very divided. We like stunting on each other. I'm better than you. Why should I work with you? Me, I want to stunt on you. That mentality, okay? If we don't eradicate that mentality, it's going to be very difficult because we are always going to then struggle. What countries like the Asian countries do very well is once they expel their colonizers, they band together and they start building ecosystems together. And you can even see it here, people. When the Indians come into Zambia with no money, no education, when they come in here, okay, what we need to start doing is they come into this country and they build relationships with each other. Okay, I've started a shop. You're supplying it. Okay, you manufacture, you bring it. Okay, you've got trucks now. You're going to push my products out. They build relationships and ecosystems with each other. That's what puts them together. Okay, that's one of any country you go to, you'll always find that the Indian community in that African country are always the wealthiest. Why? Because they build a united ecosystem. They'll always lend to each other. They'll start a hospital to heal each other. They'll start schools to educate each other's children, and they'll build shops and centers to make sure that they can feed each other. And then from that foundation, they build all sorts of businesses around that. Then they start serving us. but they always make sure that inside their community, they've sorted everything out. They've sorted themselves out. Inside their community, they've sorted themselves out. We don't like each other. That's where the problem comes. We don't like each other. And then we start going after each other instead of uniting and working with one another. That's where these failures come from. Okay? When we need to stop being in competition with each other and to start building a vision together. Today, in the president's address, he talked about a united Zambia. He talked about uniting the people to contribute to the vision of this country. The thing is, that's what we need. We need an intergenerational vision that brings us together instead of all of us just pulling apart and competing with each other. If you see your citizens cutting at each other's throats and constantly never working with one another, it is simply because we have no united vision. We have no united vision that goes beyond the 10 years of one political administration. That's one of the major things. I'll be talking about that on Monday on Money FM. So everyone, thank you so much. Michelle, one more time, thank you so much for that final comment on mining. It's something we need to learn to build ourselves. Build is the key. Build, don't take. Build. That's how we actually sustain these things. Have a wonderful day, everyone.